My name is Cody Kraus, and I'm a real estate broker owner that's obsessed with everything real estate. Investing, building, selling, developing, farming, you name it. I've been doing this since I was 18 years old, and I've learned a ton through trial and error, and I've met some of the coolest people ever. This is a show where I invite these people on to talk about their experiences and mine, plus everything else real estate. Let's go. All right. So welcome back to the Everything Real Estate Show, everybody. Today I have Alyssa Ismail on the show with me. Alyssa, for anybody who doesn't have the pleasure of knowing you, who is Alyssa?
So first and foremost, I'd say I'm a realtor. I'm almost 10 years into the business. My anniversary is coming up in the spring. Also a dedicated volunteer person in our community, Kingsville, surrounding area. I sit on the board for the Kingsville Rotary, and then I'm also an active member on the board of directors for WECAR.
Which is the Windsor-Essex County Association of Realtors, if anybody doesn't know.
It's a mouthful, but yes.
Cool. And so we've worked at the same company now for your whole decade, for your whole career, which is almost a decade, which is where I've been for my whole career too. Makes me wonder, why did you get into real estate sales in the first place?
So I did go to school at the University of Windsor for business administration, did a concentration in marketing.
Okay.
And at the time, if you would have asked me, I would have said, I never want to be in commission sales.
Ever.
And it's not something that I was interested in or wanted to do. But when I graduated, my first job was actually with Ontario Tourism, which I really loved, working for the provincial government. There was, some...
And was that out of Windsor, or did you have to go to Toronto for that? Or
So I worked in a bunch of their offices. They used to have one, if you remember, off the Ambassador Bridge. There was a tourism office. So anybody coming off the bridge, there was one outside.
By Popeyes, yeah. Okay.
Yes, there was one outside of the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel. Then they moved the one from Huron Church by the bridge to the service center in Tilbury.
Okay.
I worked there. And at one point, I did a very short stint in Sarnia.
Okay.
So that job was a fantastic job, fantastic opportunity, but it just wasn't fulfilling my needs, I guess, in terms of being challenging enough.
Okay, so not really fulfilling maybe.
Yeah. And so at that point, I thought about law. That was my next go-to and thought process.
Like be a cop or be a lawyer?
Be a lawyer.
Okay. You like to argue, so that would be a natural,
it would be a natural thing for me. So I actually had a coffee with one of your previous guests, Sebastian Schmorians, and we had a conversation, and he said, you know what? It's a great career, but I was kind of toying the idea of real estate versus law. And he says, I think you have the personality for it, and I think you should go for it. So I did. And then at that point, I had a family member in the business who was a great mentor to me, who brought me into Century 21. And I really learned a lot from that. I was exposed to a lot of deals and a lot of opportunity that way, which, kind of led me into my solo career, which has been fantastic.
Cool. And so, I mean, there is kind of some parallels between law and real estate too, right? Like when you take on a client as a lawyer, let's say you're going to court, you're fighting for them, for their best interests, all that kind of stuff too. And in real estate, you tend to have to do that also, right? You have a buyer, they want to make an offer on a house. There might be 3 other offers, and you have to make a case for why your buyer should strike the heartstrings of the seller and why they should accept your offer, why they're the most qualified, the most likely to actually close. If they accept your offer, all that kind of stuff, you're fighting for value to make sure that what they're paying is fair and that the seller's being, I guess, remunerated correctly also. So there is some parallels there.
100%.
But maybe he just realized that, I mean, there's some things about being a lawyer that'd be really tough. It's not something I desire to do in the slightest.
I think, like in the aftermath of it, I'm very, very happy with the decision that I made. I think being in real estate and real estate sales gives you kind of the best of both worlds. Because like you said, you are advocating for your client. You are having those conversations with either the seller or the seller's agent. Whereas if I was just on the law side, if that's, where I ultimately ended up, I think I would miss some of the interactions of the day-to-day with the clients. And, I love walking through the homes and seeing all that kind of stuff, and more of the background stories with the families. Why are we moving? Why are we selling? What's the scenario?
And as a lawyer, you'd probably only get the negative side of it, right? Why didn't it close on time? Where are the keys?
Right.
I'm paying too much in property taxes, all this kind of stuff. Whereas on the real estate sales side of it, you're in the perils of it when it's tough with your client. If you have to call them, hey, you didn't get the house, or they didn't want to come up to the price that you need, all that kind of stuff. But you do get to share in the wins too, right? Hey guys, guess what? You got it.
It's the best call to make, especially, the last few years when we've been dealing so much with multiple offers and all that kind of stuff. When your client finally gets the house and you can call them and say, hey guys, guess what? We got this one.
Yep.
And the joy typically on the other side of the phone, or sometimes you're met with, oh my God, like, really? Are you sure? Like, we got it. We got it. Like, we've been working at this for so long.
Yep.
But yeah, that part is fantastic. I love it.
Cool. And would you say that's like the driving thing? Is that what you enjoy about it the most, or what do you really thoroughly enjoy about this career?
I definitely enjoy the people aspect of it, although there's good days, there's bad days with it. But meeting new people is something that I find kind of comes naturally to me. I'm naturally a talker. I'm naturally a people person, I like to think. So I very much enjoy that. And I think the other side of it is doing the best for that client and really kind of making a difference in their life, because buying a home or selling a home is such a monumental thing in anybody's life.
There's emotions, there's highs, there's lows.
And just being there for them kind of as a support system, going through those emotions, whether it's for good reason or not so good reason, because we see both sides. That's, I think, what I definitely love the most.
And then thoroughly understanding the process and then helping them through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've always said our job as realtors is, in my opinion, to educate the client to make the best decision for them. So as much as I can tell you, hey, this is a great deal and you should buy this and whatnot, I want to show you the statistics and explain to you why this might make sense for you, whether you're a first-time buyer, investor, downsizing, upsizing, whatever it might be. So give you the tools to make a decision for yourself, but an educated one.
Yeah. And you've probably heard me say this 1,000 times, but like we used to be called real estate salespersons or people or whatever. Now we're allowed to use realtor or real estate agent. And I prefer that better just because I never liked being viewed as a salesperson. We happen to be in sales, but we live in the information age. You can get anything you need on the internet. We used to be the gatekeepers of all the information before MLS was online through realtor.ca and all that kind of stuff. So I believe thoroughly now that like our job is to provide as much information that's relative to the decision they're trying to make. Mm-hmm. And we deal with adults that are totally capable of making what they feel is the best decision for them. If there's something that they haven't, factored into the process, make them aware of it, but they're going to do what's right for them, regardless of what we think is the right decision for them.
Absolutely.
Often they're the same thing, but we do want them to come to their own conclusion, not just go off of what we say.
For sure. There's definitely times where, you might give them a disclosure of, a floodplain area or something like that. And maybe personally, you or myself wouldn't choose to buy there, but they're like, nope, we love it and we want to move forward. Again, as long as we're providing them all that information and just making sure that they're aware to make the best decision for their family, that's, I think, the most important.
Cool. So let's shift gears a little bit. So you've been in real estate sales for almost 10 years now. Now you've invested a little bit in real estate sales too. So I thought that your first purchase was your duplex, but you just told me before the show that you actually did a flip before that too. Do you want to talk about how and why you bought a flip and then what you did after that going into an investment rental property? And the reason that I want to touch on that is you're a millennial, I'm a millennial. Mm-hmm. So we hear a lot of excuses like my kids will never own real estate. We're not that old. We're both in our low 30s still, right? So it can be done. However, your first house wasn't your forever house in the greatest neighborhood that you could have ever imagined and all that kind of stuff. You had to climb the ladder to get to where you live now, right?
Yes. Yep,
cool.
Absolutely.
So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So I had a business partner during the pandemic, and our first purchase was actually a family home in a beautiful residential neighborhood in LaSalle. And we just kind of stumbled upon this opportunity. So we met basically, I was a realtor and he was a contractor renovator. So we kind of had both sides of the program.
You had the expertise on the purchase and the resale. And he could do the
work. And he had done work for many people prior to. And he goes, well, I don't have any skin in that game. So I'm looking for somebody to partner with where I can do the work and have the skin in the game, but also share in the risk and liability.
Yep.
So that's where I came in. And we found this great ranch in LaSalle, and it had actually been sitting, which wasn't common during COVID.
Was it at like the beginning when things were still sketchy, or like
It was
towards the end?
It was in October of 2020.
Okay, so things were hot.
So things were hot, but I think for this particular house, the paint colors and things like that in the home were a little off. And as much as, you know, you and I can walk into a place and see the potential, a lot of the consumers don't necessarily see it that way, which is why staging is so important and, you know, that type of thing.
Plus prices were going up so much that like pre-pandemic, when our average sale price was, you know, $300,000, you could buy the home and still have a little bit of cash left over to do the renos. All of a sudden prices go up 50%, double. Now all of a sudden you don't have the cash after the purchase to get some of the work done too, right?
Right. So we were able to secure this great property. The renovation that we did there was all new flooring, brand new kitchen, it wasn't a wet bar, but a servery area with kind of the bar fridges and whatnot.
The AM/PM station?
The AM/PM station that you're talking about.
Yep.
2 bathrooms, some updates in the basement, mostly painting and that kind of stuff. And
so full cosmetic reno.
Full cosmetic, yes. Full cosmetic reno on the inside, a little bit of work outside, not a ton. And we budgeted with in mind that the prices weren't going to continue to rise, although we know that they did. But just to be wary and make sure that if the worst case scenario happened and the market turned or whatever it was going to be, because as much as people like to think we have a crystal ball, we don't know what's necessarily going to happen next. We know the trends and the predictions, but so we budgeted, we were able to get everything done, sold, signed, everything within 5 months.
Wow. You should write a book.
It was a labor of love. I will say that. I would work from the home that we were renovating and leave to go do my showings. But in between, I would be doing any kind of like light work that I could do, whether it was cleaning, painting, that kind of stuff. And then my business partner would do the major stuff, installing of the kitchen and flooring, and we redid a fireplace, trim work, that kind of stuff. And what I loved about it was I got to go out and design a home. And I love that side of the business, and that part was great. It was very fulfilling, and we did very well because one, we budgeted well. We were very good with our time management.
And you did a lot of the work yourself too. Like that's big.
Yes. Right? So we didn't have to hire anybody externally to come in, minus a junk removal company at one point to take all of the old kitchen cabinetry and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And we actually sold it off market to I had a contact with another agent who had clients looking in the area. Made a call, sold it off market, and that was a great starting point where we then had money in the bank account. And that's when we ended up buying a duplex.
Okay.
So we transitioned from that to the duplex. The duplex actually was owner occupied on both levels. So when
so you got vacant possession.
So we got vacant possession, and we got tenants pretty much right away who paid good rent. And we just went in, basically cleaned it up, did some painting, deep cleaning, some light fixtures, that sort of thing.
Very different from the flip where your cupboards trim.
Yes. So the bones of the duplex were great.
Okay.
And the location was great. It was like right on the border of LaSalle and Windsor, on Matchett. So you were close to, you know, the expressway, the United States, the borders and all of that. So we had a good amount of interest. And just doing some painting, some cleanup, like I said, we were able to get it rented. And then as we kind of saw the market continue to rise, we had a conversation at that point to say, okay, do we want to continue to be landlords?
Or do we cash out?
Yes, or do we cash out? Because at that point, I was living in LaSalle, but I had just bought my first home in Kingsville. So I was going to be moving out of area. He also was moving to Amherstburg out of area where he was previously in Windsor, my business partner. So it was kind of that sort of conversation to say, hey, what makes the most sense? So we were able to cash out on that, fully tenanted, made a lot of sense. And
put some more money down in your primary, smaller mortgage.
Exactly. So it really worked out. But like you said about millennials and oh, my kids are never going to be able to move out. And, I think a lot more people are staying at home into their late 20s, maybe early 30s.
Or 40s.
Or 40s.
And 50s, yeah.
There is a way to do it. And yes, it's going to take a little bit of risk and it's going to take some elbow grease. But I will be the first to say, like, if I could do it, you can do it.
Yeah. So lower your expectation. Like, I think growing up, we always saw the homes that our parents lived in and nice homes, but they might've been worth like $250,000. Right. So like, I remember I had a guy that I went to public school with, like elementary school. He dropped out, grade 8, went and got a job in a warehouse and just worked a ton of hours, and then bought a home that was a little bit dated, but in one of the nicest subdivisions in our town at 18 years old. But it was $185,000.
Very smart.
Right. But he worked his tail off, saved everything he made, and then he still didn't move into that house. He ended up renting it out because he's like, look, I can still live at home with my parents, build some equity here. Years later, he got married and then ended up moving into the home, and he kept it, and it put him in a great spot. But we have this expectation like, well, this is what my parents lived in, and it might have been their first home. Often it wasn't. They might have had, like, I remember my parents rented for, I think, 2 years after they got married. They were so busy trying to build their business, they couldn't be worrying about, taking the equity away from their business to put into a house and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, you have to have an end vision of what you want, and you have to take steps way ahead of time to get there. Right.
Exactly.
So if I do want to live in this neighborhood, that might be the second or third or fourth ring on the property ladder. I'm going to have to make a few other decisions in the meantime. And it might mean taking on a partner, might mean continuing to live at home and not going out as often as my friends are, buying an investment property before I buy, my dream home, putting in the elbow grease, doing the paint myself, scrubbing the floor, all that kind of stuff. So I guess if we lower our expectations and we roll up our sleeves to get down and dirty, do some work, and potentially take on partners and all that kind of stuff, anyone can do it. And you're saying, if I can do it, you can do it. I'm not going to take anything away from you. You have a lot of drive, and that's awesome. I did that, went into it totally blind, made a lot of mistakes. And at the end of it still worked out. I went into it totally dumb at 19 years old. And I think my conversation with Stacy, you probably watched that one too. Like, at the time, you don't know what you're doing, but do something. Do something
and start somewhere. And if it's a small, manageable project and that's your stepping stone, because I think, especially our generation, exactly what you said, we see where we grew up, and we typically grew up in these nice homes, and we think like, oh, well, I don't want to move out and downgrade. Yep. I want to live this comfortable lifestyle that I've been used to.
So we go and rent condos for $3,000 a month.
Right. Brand new condos or whatever it is with the underground parking and the gym. But if you actually sacrifice a little bit, and whether that means not going out or not, eating out all the time, whatever it is.
Drive an old car,
or just start, if all you can afford is a $250,000 fixer-upper, start there.
Or if you can't afford that, start with, how do I save the down payment for that?
100%, right? Because you have to start to build that equity to get yourself where you want to be. It's not just going to miraculously happen. And I think the idea of, okay, well, just live at home and save for your down payment until you have enough to buy the house that you want. Well, with the way that things are moving in the market, and, if prices are going up 10% a year on average, which isn't necessarily the average, but I don't know that you can keep up.
No, I had a young client. His name's Joel. I'll give him a shout out because Joel was he had me on his podcast not too long ago. So he talked about his personal real estate journey over COVID. So I'm sure he's okay with me using it as an example. So Joel and Courtney were looking for a home. They were talking about getting married. And then all of a sudden they got engaged. So like, okay, heat's on. We got to do this now. We got to find a house to move into. And he started the search in, I think, 2019 or 2020. And he was doing the Dave Ramsey thing. And I love Dave Ramsey economics, and it makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, we were just in a period of time where there was such rapid appreciation that waiting until you had that 20% or more for the home that you really, really wanted, you were better off just buying something, because the appreciation was he goes, Cody, I feel like I'm being penalized for doing it the right way, which is trying to save money. I might save 5 or 10% a year, but if houses are appreciating at 20%, which they did in 2020, now my down payment's actually worth less money.
Yep. You're not staying caught up.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that a lot with clients who were active in the market during COVID. If they, wrote a few offers and didn't get anything, say in July,
yeah,
by the time they got around to September, their buying power had
just
shifted,
diminished. Yeah.
Completely diminished, and to no fault of their own. Not that they weren't trying and not that they weren't doing the right things, but the way that the market was moving at that time.
Nothing like that had ever happened before. And people were like, the sky is going to fall. Like I had one client and they were like, these prices don't make any sense. So they sold their primary residence because they're like, trust us, the prices are going to fall. And so sweet family, I never use their name, but I always use them as an example. You should never try and time the market with your primary residence.
Right.
Right. I think prices are going to fall, so I'm going to sell. No, you still have to live somewhere. So if you're going to sell it and you cashed out, you're going to end up renting or looking for another house to move into. But if you're selling high, you're buying high. Okay, well, it's kind of a wash in a sense, other than paying a whole bunch in land transfer tax and closing fees. However, they went into rent, but they got the fall wrong. Right. So it still continued to appreciate for like 4 years after that. And it did eventually come down, but still significantly higher than where they sold at. So if you want to try and play the market with a rental property or a flip or whatever, do it in a calculated manner. If it's money you can afford to lose or you have equity to cover, okay, no problem. But when it comes to a primary residence, you still need somewhere to live at the end of the day.
Right.
And I know we do look at them like investments and we always, okay, well, if I put in the pool, will I get my money back? Again, if it's your primary residence, you really want a pool, put in the pool, but don't
for your own use. Yeah.
Don't call your home an investment unless it's actually, we do have people that move every single year and fix them up and that's part of their business.
Sure.
But that's not the case with 99% of us.
Yeah. My mom lived in the home that we grew up in from 1998 to 2022.
Yep.
So
could have sold it in 2017.
Could have sold it, could have done a bunch of stuff, but it just didn't make sense for her at the time. So, yeah.
Well, and she held on till 2022 and probably did just phenomenal.
She did well. She was happy.
Good. Okay, so that's kind of your real estate ownership journey. So it went from a flip to being a landlord of a duplex to, okay, now's a good time to sell that and go into a primary residence. And you still have that home and it's in a great neighborhood. And I know you love living there. Shift gears once again. You mentioned at the beginning of the conversation under who is Alyssa likes to volunteer, and I know you're active in Rotary, but something to bring it back specifically to real estate is you are serving on the board of directors at our local real estate board right now. And so if anybody's unfamiliar with all the associations in Canada, to have a realtor with a trademark, you have to be part of CREA, which is the Canadian Real Estate Association. And then by province, it'd be OREA, which is the Ontario Real Estate Association. And then locally is WECAR, which is the Windsor-Essex County Association of Realtors.
Yes.
So to have that realtor trademark name, you have to be part of all three of those. What on earth do all those organizations do? Why would you want to serve on them? And what's the benefit to the industry and the consumer?
So I guess I can speak mostly to WECAR because that's obviously where my experience is. I've been with them, I believe, since the end of 2020 is when I became a director, and it's been phenomenal. We have such a great back-end staff in our board office that some people may know, some people may not know, but they really run a tight ship.
And our local board is like applauded across Ontario.
We do win a lot of awards. Krista is phenomenal. She's so organized, and I don't know how she has all of that information.
And all the staff underneath her, too. They're amazing.
There is, Stephanie, Natalia, Tara, Brandy, Art, Corinne. And if I missed anybody, I'm sorry, but they honestly need to be applauded for all of their work that they do. Did you say
Joel?
Joel, yes, Joel. They do need to be applauded because they win awards. They are brought in to consult for different boards, just to kind of know how it's done.
Yep.
But so I got into it. I was interested in understanding more, essentially.
Yep.
So, at a brokerage level, we have our office meetings and you provide us some fantastic information. But there's so much out there. And for me, I think knowledge is power. So I like to know kind of what's coming down the pipeline.
Definitely.
And not even just for myself to prepare, but to be able to give that information to my clients or, help anybody else who asks, like, okay, well, if you know this is coming, do you need to make a change in your business model or something like that?
Or the advice that you give to your clients.
100%.
Yep.
So the whole purpose of WECAR is really to give back to the membership. Like the role of the board is to make decisions that will better the membership.
The membership being the realtors that are part of it.
And we are 1,600 and change currently, which is the highest I think we've ever been. So there are a lot of members to take into consideration.
Yep.
And just things, what policies do we get, say, from the Canadian Real Estate Association or the Ontario Real Estate Association that we then have to apply locally and rolling that out so it's more seamless, so it doesn't interrupt people's businesses. There's obviously a technology side to it. So there's constantly new, MLS systems and things like that we may be looking into, let's say, to adapt to change, because as we know, the industry is ever changing. The data that's available is ever changing.
The open offer scenario.
Yeah, open offers, things like that. Like when we adapted AuthentiSign into everything that we do, because
just digital signing for deals.
Yeah, digital signing. It was something that used to have a pen to paper signature
with a witness.
With a witness, and now with AuthentiSign. So integrating that into the back end of things. I'm sure there will be other things, maybe final offer, or could be something that would come up down the road. But I just I like to have the knowledge. I'd like to know what's going on and be able to help people through that change, because a lot of it is change. I don't know what the average age for realtors are in Essex County.
It used to be in the 60s, but I think it's gotten a lot lower.
Well, and typically as we age, we are more adverse to change. So again, making things as easy and seamless as possible. The other
fun stat, do you know what percentage of realtors are women in NAR in the US? Not. What do you think it is?
I would say, I would hope it to be more than 50%.
63.
Yeah.
So 6 out of 10 realtors are female.
So an industry that didn't used to have women in it.
Yep.
And now we are the majority.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah. And I should look up the age one. I'll get back to you on the age one too. But.
The other part of it too was on the board, and the board changes all the time. I think they're 2-year terms depending on what position you're in. But just the vast difference in age, I guess we have some agents who do mostly commercial, some who do mostly residential, maybe somebody who's on the development side. So you just have that diversity in terms of we're not just
experience and specialization.
And we're not just working, everybody's a residential real estate salesperson, so that's all we can really speak to. It's nice to have that variety.
Yep.
And variety in age as well, right? I don't think I'm the youngest person who's ever been on the board, but I think currently I am the youngest.
Yep.
And what I'm looking for my career might be different than somebody who's in their 60s.
Yep.
But we need to hear both sides of it.
Now, so a lot of what the board does is making sure that policies that are being put in place benefit the membership. But I think at the base of all of it, it's benefiting the consumer too, right? Because part of what the board does is enforce ethics and standards. So if there's a complaint, you can go through the Real Estate Council of Ontario, but if it's a localized complaint, often it's going to go to the real estate board that you're operating within. And then they'll have subcommittees, like an ethics committee and all that kind of stuff too, right? And I know the boards locally, they do get their discretion of certain things. So for example, our board, which I love, uses Bluetooth lockboxes. Mm-hmm. And I explained to our consumers that they're very beneficial because they actually keep track of a log of which realtor comes in and at what time. Unless you're registered as a realtor or a third-party service provider like an appraiser, you do not have access to those.
Right.
So I can't give Joe Blow down the street a code to go enter a house because someone was just fined for this. I think in BC or Ontario, the realtor just gave them a lockbox code. They let themselves in, walked through the house, which is a big no-no.
Right.
Unless you have express written consent from a seller for a very, very specific circumstance. But that one, for example, these things are really expensive. but they give the consumer safety. You can set hours on them so people don't go in, say, before 8 p.m. or after 10 p.m. If someone went in that wasn't supposed to, you have a log of it so that you can, find out what's going on or lodge a complaint if it was. So they do benefit the membership, but I think at the root of everything that they're doing is protecting the consumer also, and then applying a level of professionalism to the entire industry. And so you have your local board, then they're affiliated with the provincial board, and then with the Canadian board. And some things are going to be different, say, in Alberta compared to Nova Scotia. But there is a certain set of rules that CREA thinks that every realtor in Canada should adhere to. And again, generally they benefit the public. They benefit the membership because it's a huge spirit of cooperation between companies, regardless who you work for, or even if you work for the same company, but you sell against each other, whatever. They make sure that a certain level of cooperation is adhered to.
Right.
And we know that benefits the consumer also, because when people have a monopoly, things tend to not go well. So we know that having diversity of choice of who your realtor is or which company you're working with, all that kind of stuff, it's a really, really good thing. But when you have people that are competitors, but also have to cooperate with each other all the time, how do you navigate those waters? And I think the real estate associations in Canada do that very well.
There's obviously like that level of professionalism that has to remain, whether you work for Century 21 or you work for Remax or a small local independent. We're all coworkers.
Yeah.
So, you need to get along. You should get along in that sense for your clients and to make, deals run smoothly and that kind of thing. But it's just different in our industry, because just because you work for a certain company doesn't mean you only practice real estate with those people.
Yep.
So that's why, the bigger kind of governing body over everything to keep things structured and to keep things, ethical and fair really
And
really
it even
helps.
like levels the playing field from big franchise company to small independent with maybe one or two people too, right?
Right.
It puts all of them on the same level and says, no, this is the baseline that everybody has to adhere to, and you all have to play in the same sandbox nicely.
Yeah, I think to circle back to one thing you mentioned was like the subcommittees and stuff that are available at WECAR. You have an ethics committee. I'm trying to think.
Is there an advertising one?
Don't put me on the spot. I don't know.
Okay.
There's a good amount of them, and for whatever reason, all of the names of them are escaping me.
Yep.
But that's something that anybody who is an agent or broker or whatever, if you're interested in getting involved, they're always looking for more volunteers to sit on these committees. And if it is an ethics committee, you might meet couple times a year or something like that. A lot of the meetings have transitioned to Zoom. So instead of having to drive into Windsor if you're out from the county, but just to get involved and to help. And it's just a way to give back, I guess, to an organization that does so much for its members.
Yeah. Another thing too is like advocacy, right? So locally, 1,600 realtors, they're not going to listen to 1,600 realtors with 1,600 different opinions in Ottawa or Toronto. However, when you have a representative board of professionals like yourselves for an area, they do need to listen to that. And so I think what CREA and AREA and all the local boards do a good job is kind of unifying a voice that's good for the industry. And again, when I say good for the industry, yes, we want to protect the professionals that we represent, but it is at the core root of it always for the consumer, because we believe that the best interest is always, it needs to go to the consumer first and everybody else second. But there's like I could be wrong, but I think it's 168,000 realtors in Canada, something like that. Now, mind you, 70,000 of them alone are just in TREB, which is the Toronto Regional.
Regional.
They added a B. Anyways, I forget.
The state board.
TREB now. But TREB is like 70,000 alone, but you have called 160, 180,000 realtors across Canada. When the government makes changes to amortizations of mortgages, to stress test in declining interest rate environments or increasing interest rate environments, or policies on new construction or additional dwelling units, you have 100 and something thousand people that are professionals that are active daily in this industry that see the real world implications of what these policies being put into place are. And because we've not everybody in Canada that has a real estate license is part of CREA, but the vast majority are. Because we've unified locally with boards and provincially with a board and across Canada with a board, it is kind of a voice that goes direct into Queen's Park and Parliament Hill, because they're like, no, this is the industry. They're in the trenches with the consumers that we're trying to legislate to protect. We should probably hear, it's one thing if you're a career politician and you're making some changes to the mortgage rules in Ontario, or even Bank of Canada, which isn't technically government, but it's our whatever. I forget what they're called. But the Bank of Canada makes a lot of the decisions on lending policies and things like that. They do need to listen to the industry. And if the industry is just 160,000 people with their own voices, they're never going to listen to us. So when you go through the process of a sense of professionalism set up with committees and boards, and they're not new, they've been around for decades, they're fairly respected. And I think that the governments do pay attention to us. So the advocacy that we end up bringing to the end user, which is the consumer, through a professional organization like that and organized real estate, it's a big thing that maybe most people don't see. And I don't think you're going to get a lot of recognition for what you're doing from the public. But as realtors, we are very, very appreciative of the people that are willing to give up, part of their life to, it might not, and to some people, it might not seem like you're solving homelessness, but there is a greater overall contribution, which is advocating for Canadians to own homes and to rent homes. And it can structure policy around construction and all that kind of stuff. So maybe face value, it doesn't look like it's meeting a greater need, but I do believe it is. And I think that's because I see it on a daily basis. I guess, is there, a greater reason why you think that being involved in organized real estate is bettering Canadians?
Bettering Canadians. So I guess, one thing to touch upon is you mentioned there's not really any clout to being on the board. It's more, you're there, you're volunteering your time. I would say most of our membership probably couldn't name the directorship that's currently there. And that's not why you get into it, and that's not why you do it. Yeah,
and it's not like you get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars.
No, it's a volunteer position. If you're joining because you think there's going to be, some kind of payment or some kind of side opportunity, it's not the case. You really have to get in because you want to, help and make a difference. So I guess to your point, how do I think that's helping Canadians is having those voices in those meetings. So our directorship will attend the AREA, the annual general meeting, also the CREA, the Canadian Real Estate Annual General Meeting. We do have votes. So the executive committee of the board, which I believe consists of the president, immediate past president, and president-elect, we do have conversations based on the information that we're given at these conferences to vote in accordance with what we believe our membership would want or what would be best for our membership, which would then trickle down to the consumers. So everything, I guess, that we do at the end of the day really does benefit the end user, the consumer. So your average Canadian person who is either in the market or looking to get into the market, what I think one of our biggest things is trying to create less barriers to entry, which is why you're seeing a lot of changes, with the mortgage terms and all of that to try and get people the opportunity to get in.
Yeah, because we've realized prices probably are not going to come down.
Mm-hmm. So something's got to give, right? And we can't make prices go down.
Yep.
So if we can provide them a different opportunity, but those are all things that not necessarily come up as a voting matter at these conferences, but are definitely widely discussed. And, they will have panels, they will ask questions from, the audience. And these are massive conference centers with thousands of representatives, especially the Canadian real estate one, because you have people who fly in, typically it's in Ottawa, but you have people who fly in from every province to have their voices heard and to ask those probing questions to, the decision makers, so that if they send something kind of our way, and I will say people aren't shy to give their opinion of if they don't think it's going to be great for the consumer.
Yeah.
So you have those advocates out there from the different boards from all over the country who are, fighting on behalf of the consumer.
And I think kind of cool too, like serving on the board, you're probably like, when you come to it brand new, you're green, you're like, okay, I want to learn more. And then you probably get mentored to a sense by a lot of the people that are either working in the organization or have been on the board for maybe a few terms or a few years already. And they want to build up the next round of leadership also. So, right. So they would pour into you, and then you would understand, okay, well, now that I've been into it for a few years, there going to be some new green people coming in under me. Now, part of my job is to pass the baton, build them up so that they know that they need to operate in the best interest of consumers and the members also. I was, new at one time, so I can give them this tip, and hopefully they can bless someone else with that advice moving down the road too, right?
Yeah, I was very green when I joined the board. I had been in real estate for, I believe it was 5 or 6 years at the time, and I really didn't know what I was getting myself into when I joined, but I knew I wanted to help in any way and to get, that additional information and that kind of stuff. And again, the team at the WECAR office is fantastic, and they have done a great job at kind of like holding your hand and teaching you the things that you do need to know, and maybe giving you a different perspective on, okay, well, we're going to think about it this way because we need to, obviously we're talking about a membership as a whole. We're not just talking about one office or two offices, that sort of thing. And since I've been there, yes, we've had people come, we've had people go. We've had people come back who had previously served, who then took some time off and now have rejoined later into their career. So they bring an entirely different set of knowledge now because they've had different life experiences since then. So it's very rewarding, I would say. And you get to have these relationships with some different industry partners that I may not have met previously. And you pick their brains about different things. And there's a lot of sharing of knowledge that goes around that table to really make the best decisions.
Cool. Well, we covered a lot. So I guess your entry into the sales career and where it's led you to since, your investing journey from a flip to being a landlord, and now, hey, I just own where I live, and that's a good thing. Kind of climbing the real estate ladder, and then the chat about organized real estate, which I apologize because I kind of rambled on all that and it might have been tough to follow. Anything that you want to leave the listeners with in regards to those topics, or even just something different, or maybe for someone who's not sure what to do for a career that's kind of wondering like you were doing at one point?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not sure career-wise, if real estate is right for you, I would say reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation or meet for a coffee and just talk about, I can only speak to my experience in the industry, obviously, but I've very much enjoyed it. And, I think there's some misconceptions out there of what being a real estate agent is. And
we show people 3 houses, they buy one.
Yeah, your flexible hours, you work whenever you want, you take all your time off. But if you want a really kind of in-depth look into my experience, I'm happy to share that with anybody at any point in time. I think it's just good to have those conversations. And I was lucky enough before I got into the industry to have those conversations, which really helped me make my decision.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Alyssa, and her company is Making Moves Real Estate, and she trades under Century 21 in Kingsville. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Cody.
Thanks for listening to the show, folks. Please keep in mind that this show is not offering legal, financial, or accounting advice, but rather opinions and experiences in the world of real estate from the host and the guests. If you're enjoying the show, please rate, review, and share with your friends and colleagues. And if you think that there's someone that needs to be on this show, please feel free to connect them with me. Or if there's a topic that should be discussed, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much, and bye for now.